The stars had belonged to the Valanthi Dominion for 10,000 years. Their empire stretched across 300 systems, and in all that time, no species had ever truly challenged them. They were the masters of their corner of the galaxy, and they intended to keep it that way. High Commander Ithraval stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Silence. He was tall for his kind, nearly 3 meters of pale blue skin and thin limbs. His 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern on his elongated face, stared out at the endless darkness of space. Behind him, the soft hum of the ship's systems provided a constant reminder of Valanthi power. "You wish to see me, High Commander?" a voice said from behind. Ithraval did not turn around. He knew the voice. It belonged to strategic advisor Kethrani, one of the finest military minds in the Dominion. She had helped plan the conquest of 17 worlds. Her strategies had never failed. "I did," Ithraval said. "I have been reviewing the reports from our scouts in the outer sectors. There is something that concerns me." Kethrani moved to stand beside him. She was smaller than Ithraval, but her presence commanded respect. Her silver uniform bore the marks of 100 campaigns. "The humans," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, the humans." The word felt strange in Ithraval's mouth. Humans. Such a simple name for such a troubling species. They had appeared on the galactic stage only 2 centuries ago, a mere heartbeat in the life of an empire like the Dominion. And yet, in that short time, they had done something remarkable. They had expanded. Not slowly, as young species usually did. Not carefully testing each step before taking the next. No, the humans had exploded outward from their home system like a plague. 12 systems in 200 years. Colony ships by the hundreds. Populations in the billions. "They grow too fast," Ithraval said. "It is not natural." "Agreed," Kethrani replied. "I have studied their expansion patterns. They do not follow the normal rules. Most young species take 1,000 years to colonize a single system beyond their own. The humans do it in decades." "How is this possible?" Kethrani was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. "They breed quickly. Their lifespans are short, perhaps 80 of their years on average. But they reproduce at an alarming rate, and they are adaptable. They settle on worlds that other species would consider marginally habitable. Worlds with extreme temperatures, worlds with thin atmospheres, worlds with heavy gravity." Ithraval finally turned to face her. "You sound almost impressed." "I am concerned," Kethrani corrected. "A species that can thrive in such conditions is a species that will be difficult to contain. If we wait too long, they will become a true threat to the Dominion." This was the heart of the matter. Ithraval had been thinking the same thing for months now. The humans had not attacked any Valanthi interests. They had not made aggressive moves toward Dominion space. In fact, they seemed almost friendly, sending diplomatic messages and trade proposals. But Ithraval had not maintained the Dominion's power for 10,000 years by waiting for enemies to strike first. He had maintained it by crushing potential threats before they could grow strong enough to fight back. "Gather the War Council," he said. "It is time to discuss the human problem." The War Council met in the Great Chamber at the heart of the Eternal Silence. It was a room designed to intimidate, with walls of black stone and a ceiling that disappeared into darkness. Around a massive circular table sat the 12 most powerful military leaders in the Dominion. Ithraval stood at the head of the table, his hands clasped behind his back. On the wall behind him, a holographic display showed a map of the galaxy. A small cluster of systems was highlighted in red. Human space. "You have all seen the reports," Ithraval began. "The humans have expanded to 12 systems. Our projections suggest they will reach 20 within the next 50 years. Within a century, they could control enough territory to challenge our border worlds." "They have made no hostile moves," said Admiral Vornthax, the oldest member of the council. His voice was rough with age. "Perhaps they wish only for peace." "Perhaps," Ithraval acknowledged. "But can we afford to assume that? Look at their history. Our intelligence gatherers have studied their world, their records. They are a violent species, Admiral. They have spent most of their existence fighting each other. Wars, conflicts, endless bloodshed. It is only in the last few centuries that they have united enough to reach the stars." All the more reason to be cautious, Vornthax said. A species that has learned to overcome its violent nature may be one we can negotiate with, or it may be one that has simply found new targets for its violence, Kethrani interjected. She stood beside Ithraval, her posture rigid. I have analyzed their military capabilities. They are primitive compared to us, but they are improving rapidly. They reverse engineer technology at an alarming rate. Every trade deal we make with them, every piece of equipment they acquire from other species, they take apart and learn from. In 50 years, their weapons may be equal to ours. In 100, they may surpass us. Silence fell over the council. This was the fear that none of them wanted to speak aloud. The Valanthi had ruled for so long because they had always been the most advanced, the most powerful. The idea that a young species could catch up to them, could potentially exceed them, was terrifying. What do you propose? Asked General Shithara, a veteran of countless campaigns. Ithraval activated the holographic display. The map zoomed in on the human systems, then further, until a single blue and green world filled the screen. This is Earth, he said, the human homeworld. Our scouts report that more than 8 billion humans live on this one planet alone. It is the heart of their civilization, the source of their expansion. If we destroy it, or at least cripple it, we cripple the humans. You propose an invasion? Vornthax asked, his tone skeptical. I propose a decisive strike, Ithraval replied. We send a fleet to Earth. We destroy their orbital defenses and their military infrastructure. We land ground forces to secure their major population centers. And we demand unconditional surrender. And if they refuse, then we make an example of them. We show the galaxy what happens to species that threaten the Dominion. The council debated for hours. Some, like Vornthax, argued for caution. Others, like Sithara, were eager for battle. In the end, the vote was not even close. 10 of the 12 council members voted in favor of the invasion. The order was given. 200 warships would be assembled for the strike on Earth. 50,000 ground troops would be prepared for landing operations. The fleet would depart within the month. As the council members filed out of the chamber, Kethrani approached Ithraval. You seem troubled, she observed. Ithraval stared at the image of Earth still rotating slowly on the display. I have conquered many worlds, he said. I have faced many enemies. But something about this one feels different. Different how? He could not explain it. It was just a feeling, a cold whisper in the back of his mind. He dismissed it as foolishness. It is nothing, he said. Begin the preparations. In the weeks that followed, the Valanthi war machine roared to life. Ships were loaded with weapons and supplies. Soldiers trained for the coming battle. The mood throughout the fleet was confident, even eager. The humans were primitive, after all. This would be a quick campaign, an easy victory. Intelligence reports flowed in from scouts who had observed the human defenses. They had orbital platforms, yes, but nothing that could stand against a full Valanthi fleet. Their warships were fast but lightly armed. Their ground forces were numerous but poorly equipped compared to Valanthi soldiers. They rely heavily on what they call projectile weapons, one intelligence officer reported. Chemical propellants that launch small metal objects at high speed. Primitive but effective at close range. Their heavier weapons use explosive compounds and guided missiles. Nothing we have not seen before. What of their homeworld itself? Kethrani asked. What conditions should our soldiers expect? The officer consulted his datapad. Earth is a Class 7 world on the habitability scale. Moderate hazards. The gravity is approximately 30% higher than Valanthi Prime, which will be uncomfortable for our troops but manageable with proper conditioning. The atmosphere is nitrogen-oxygen, breathable with minor filtration. Average temperatures range from cold to warm depending on region. There is significant water coverage, approximately 70% of the surface. Any dangerous wildlife? Some. The planet has a diverse ecosystem, but nothing that should pose a serious threat to armed soldiers. The dominant predators are relatively small compared to what we have encountered on other worlds. Kethrani nodded, satisfied. And the population centers? Where should we focus our landing operations? The humans have concentrated their population in areas they call cities, massive structures housing millions of individuals. We recommend targeting the largest of these for maximum psychological impact. However, there are also strategic locations outside major cities that may be important. Power generation facilities, communication hubs, military bases. What about this region? Etherval asked, pointing to a large green area on the map of Earth. Our scans show minimal population, but significant energy signatures. That is what the humans call the Amazon rainforest, the officer explained. It is a densely vegetated region near their equator. The energy signatures you detected come from hydroelectric facilities and other infrastructure. It could be a useful secondary target. Then we will land forces there as well, Ithraval decided. We will strike them from multiple directions at once. They will have no time to organize a defense. The fleet departed on schedule. 200 warships, the pride of the Valanthi Dominion, moving through the darkness of space toward a small blue world called Earth. On board were soldiers who had never known defeat, commanders who had never lost a campaign. They expected this to be just another conquest, just another victory to add to the long list of Valanthi triumphs. The journey took 3 weeks. The human systems had no defenses at the border, no way to stop the approaching fleet. By the time human sensors detected the Valanthi ships, it was already too late. The fleet was within striking distance of Earth. "High Commander," a communications officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission from the human homeworld. They are requesting to negotiate." "Ignore it," Ithraval said. "Begin the attack." The orbital bombardment was swift and efficient. The Valanthi had perfected this technique over thousands of years. First, the defense platforms fell, their shields overwhelmed by concentrated fire from dozens of ships. Then the military satellites were destroyed, leaving the humans blind and helpless. Human warships scrambled to respond, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. They fought bravely, Ithraval had to admit. They fought with a ferocity that surprised him. But it was not enough. Within 6 hours, the space around Earth belonged to the Valanthi. "Open a channel to the planet," Ithraval ordered. "All frequencies." The communications officer nodded, and Ithraval began to speak. "People of Earth, I am High Commander Ithraval of the Valanthi Dominion. Your orbital defenses have been destroyed. Your fleet has been eliminated. You are defenseless. I offer you this one chance to surrender. Lay down your weapons, submit to Dominion rule, and your lives will be spared. Resist, and you will be destroyed." He waited for the response. He expected panic, maybe pleading. He had seen it before on other worlds. The desperate cries of a defeated species begging for mercy. What he got was silence. Then after several long minutes, a single transmission came from the surface. It was audio only, a human voice speaking in their strange language. The translation software converted it instantly. "This is the United Earth Government responding to the Valanthi Dominion. We have received your terms. Our answer is no. We will not surrender. We will not submit. If you want Earth, you will have to come down here and take it." Ithraval stared at the communications console in disbelief. Had he heard correctly? Had these primitives, these creatures whose entire military had just been destroyed in a matter of hours, actually refused to surrender? "They are fools," Kethrani said quietly. "They do not understand what they are facing." "Then we will teach them," Ithraval replied. His voice was cold. "Order the ground forces to prepare for landing. We will show these humans the price of defiance." He did not know it then, but he had just made the worst decision of his life. He was about to send his soldiers down to the surface of Earth, to the soil of a world that the Valanthi had classified as merely a moderate hazard. He was about to discover just how wrong that classification was, because the scouts who had observed Earth had done so from orbit. Their probes had scanned the surface from space, recording data about gravity and atmosphere and temperature. What they had not done, what they could not do, was actually land on the planet. No Valanthi probe had ever survived landing on Earth. And in the War Council meetings, in all the discussions about strategy and tactics and troop deployments, no one had thought to ask why. The dropships were loaded. The soldiers were ready. The invasion of Earth was about to begin. And far below, on the surface of the Deathworld that had forged the human species, the real horrors waited. The dropship shook violently as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Inside, 40 Valanthi soldiers sat in their restraints, their weapons held tightly against their chests. They were members of the 3rd Assault Division, some of the finest troops in the Dominion. They had conquered a dozen worlds together. They feared nothing. Squad leader Rethanar checked his helmet seals one more time. The intelligence briefings had warned them about Earth's atmosphere, its heavy oxygen content that could cause problems for Valanthi lungs. His suit would filter the air, make it safe to breathe. Nothing to worry about. Through the small viewports, he could see nothing but fire. The friction of entry turned the air into flame, and the ship bucked and groaned under the stress. Rethanar had made atmospheric entries before, but something about this one felt different. The ship was fighting harder than usual, struggling against a gravity that seemed to grab at it with angry hands. Then they were through. The fire faded, and Rethanar got his first look at Earth. Green. That was his first thought. So much green. The land below was covered in vegetation. An endless carpet of plant life stretching to the horizon. Trees, the intelligence reports had called them. Primitive plants that grew tall and thick. The Amazon rainforest. 30 seconds to landing, the pilot announced over the intercom. Rethanar stood, and his soldiers followed. They moved to the exit ramp, ready to deploy the moment the ship touched down. This was routine. They had done it hundreds of times. The ship landed hard, harder than it should have. Rethanar stumbled, caught himself. The extra gravity. He could feel it pressing down on him, making every movement require more effort. His suit compensated somewhat, but it was still uncomfortable. The ramp dropped, and hot air rushed in. Even through his helmet filters, Rethanar could feel the heat. It was like stepping into a furnace. The humidity was worse. A wet heaviness that seemed to cling to everything. "Move out," he ordered. "Establish a perimeter." His soldiers obeyed, spreading out into the jungle. The vegetation was thick, much thicker than the orbital scans had suggested. Massive trees rose hundreds of meters into the air, their branches tangled together to form a canopy that blocked out most of the sky. Below, smaller plants filled every available space, creating a wall of green that was almost impossible to see through. "This is not ideal terrain," one of his soldiers commented. "We adapt," Rethanar replied. "We always adapt." But as the minutes passed, he began to wonder if adaptation would be enough. The first problem was the noise. The jungle was loud, impossibly loud. Strange sounds came from every direction, chirps and screams and howls and buzzing. The soldiers looked around nervously, trying to identify the sources, but the vegetation was too thick. They could hear things moving in the undergrowth, but they could not see what was making the sounds. "What is that?" a soldier asked, pointing at something on a nearby tree. Rethanar looked. A creature sat on a branch, watching them. It was small, covered in fur, with a long tail and a flat face. Its eyes were bright and curious. "A primate," Rethanar said, remembering the intelligence briefings. "Related to the humans, according to our scientists. Harmless." The creature opened its mouth and screamed at them, a sound so loud and sudden that several soldiers raised their weapons. Then it was gone, vanishing into the canopy. "Harmless," one of the soldiers muttered. "Right." They pushed forward, following their navigation systems toward the target, a human power facility several kilometers to the east. The going was slow. The vegetation resisted them at every step, and the gravity made the march exhausting. Soldiers who could normally operate for days without rest began to tire within hours. And then the insects found them. Rethanar felt the first one land on his hand. He looked down and saw a tiny creature, smaller than his fingernail, with wings and a long, needle-like mouth. Before he could react, it stabbed through a gap in his glove and into his skin. The pain was immediate and sharp. He swatted the creature away, but the damage was done. A small wound on his hand, already swelling and turning red. "What was that?" he demanded. "Unknown," his medic replied, scanning the wound. "Some kind of parasitic flying creature. It appears to have injected a compound into your bloodstream, possibly a mild toxin or anticoagulant." "Hey, what?" "It keeps your blood from clotting, makes the wound bleed more. The creature drinks the blood." Rethanar stared at his hand in horror. A creature that drank blood? What kind of world was this? But that was only the beginning. Within minutes, the insects were everywhere. Swarms of the blood-drinking creatures, clouds of them, descending on the soldiers from all directions. They found every gap in the armor, every tiny space where skin was exposed. The soldiers swatted and slapped, but there were too many. "Seal your suits completely," Rethanar ordered. "Nothing gets in." They obeyed, but the heat inside the sealed suits was unbearable. Soldiers began to overheat, their bodies unable to cool themselves in the humid air. Two collapsed within the first hour. The medics had to unseal their suits to treat them, and the insects immediately attacked. "We need to keep moving," Rethanar said. "We cannot stay here." They pushed on, but the jungle seemed to fight them every step of the way. The ground was soft and wet, sucking at their feet. Roots tripped them. Vines tangled around their limbs. Strange plants brushed against their suits, leaving smears of sticky sap that attracted more insects. And then something grabbed Private Vethkin. One moment he was there, marching in formation. The next he was gone, pulled into the undergrowth so fast that no one saw what took him. His scream cut off almost immediately. "Defensive positions!" Rethanar shouted. "Find him!" They searched, pushing through the vegetation with their weapons raised. They found Vethkin 50 meters away, at the edge of a body of water they had not even known was there. What they found was not pretty. Something had him. Something huge and dark, mostly hidden beneath the murky water. Only its eyes were visible above the surface, cold and yellow, watching them with ancient hunger. It had Vethkin in its jaws and was dragging him under. "Fire!" Rethanar screamed. The soldiers opened up with everything they had. Energy bolts tore into the water, into the creature. It thrashed, releasing Vethkan, and for a moment they saw it clearly. A massive, scaled body, 4 stubby legs, a tail like a weapon. Its mouth was filled with teeth, more teeth than seemed possible. "What is that thing?" someone yelled. The creature submerged and disappeared. They pulled Vethkin from the water, but it was too late. His lower body was gone, bitten cleanly in half. His blood mixed with the muddy water, spreading in a dark cloud. Rethanar stared at the dead soldier, then at the still water where the monster had vanished. The intelligence reports had said nothing about this. Nothing about massive aquatic predators with teeth that could bite through Volanthi armor. "We need to call for support," his second-in-command said. "We need to complete the mission," Rethanar replied, but his voice lacked conviction. They moved away from the water, but the jungle offered no safety. The sounds around them seemed louder now, more threatening. Every shadow could hide a predator. Every pool of water could contain another monster. The next attack came from above. A soldier named Krixtal was walking beneath a large tree when something dropped onto him. It was a snake, but calling it a snake seemed inadequate. It was as long as 3 Volanthi laid end to end, thick as a soldier's torso, covered in scales that shimmered with colors. It wrapped around Krixtal before anyone could react, coiling tight, tighter, until they could hear his armor cracking. "Get it off him!" Rethanar shouted. They tried. They grabbed at the creature, tried to pull it away, but its strength was incredible. It squeezed, and Krixtal screamed, and then his screams stopped as his chest collapsed. In desperation, Rethanar drew his blade and began cutting. The snake's blood was cold and dark, spraying across his suit. It took nearly a minute to kill the creature, and by then Krixtal was dead. 2 soldiers lost in less than an hour, and they had not even seen any humans yet. "Commander," his communications officer said, "I am receiving reports from the other landing zones. They are experiencing similar problems, heavy casualties from wildlife and environmental hazards." "How heavy?" "The 3rd and 4th companies report 30% losses. The 7th company has lost contact entirely. 30%. Lost to animals and weather, not to human weapons, not to enemy soldiers, to the planet itself." Rethanar looked around at his remaining soldiers. They were scared. He could see it in their body language, in the way they jumped at every sound. These were veterans, warriors who had faced death on a dozen worlds, and they were scared of a jungle. But so was he. "Keep moving," he ordered. "We have a mission to complete." They did not make it far. The attack came from the trees, silent and fast. A blur of spotted fur, a flash of claws. Private Yethnal went down, screaming, something on top of him. Rethanar spun, weapon raised, and saw it clearly. It was a predator, a pure killing machine. 4 legs, a sleek body covered in golden fur marked with black spots. Its eyes were yellow and cold, and its claws were red with Valanthi blood. It looked at Rethnar with an expression that could only be described as hunger. He fired. The energy bolt caught the creature in the shoulder, and it roared, a sound that shook the trees. But it did not die. It leaped away, vanishing into the undergrowth, leaving Yethnal bleeding on the ground. "Medic!" Rethnar shouted, but the medic was already there. The wounds were deep, 4 parallel slashes across Yethnal's chest. The armor had slowed the claws but not stopped them. "He will live," the medic reported, "but he cannot continue." That made 3. 3 soldiers gone, and they were not even halfway to their objective. "What was that creature?" someone asked. "A jaguar," the communications officer replied, consulting his database. "A local predator. The intelligence report said they were relatively small and posed minimal threat." "Minimal threat?" Rethnar stared at the officer. "It just tore through military-grade armor." "The reports were based on orbital observation. They may have underestimated the capabilities of local wildlife." Underestimated. That was one word for it. Rethnar was beginning to think that the intelligence division had not understood this world at all. They established a temporary camp and called for medical evacuation. While they waited, Rethnar took stock of the situation. His squad had started with 40 soldiers. He was now down to 36, and several of those were injured. They had traveled less than 2 kilometers. Their objective was still several kilometers away, and night was falling. The sounds of the jungle changed as the sun went down. The daytime creatures fell silent, replaced by new sounds, clicks and chirps and howls that were somehow worse than what had come before. The darkness was absolute, the thick canopy blocking out any light from the stars. Even their night vision equipment struggled to penetrate the gloom. "Something is watching us," a soldier whispered. Rethnar looked. Eyes. Dozens of eyes glowing in the darkness, surrounding their camp. The creatures stayed just outside the light of their emergency lamps, circling, waiting. "Hold position," Rethnar ordered. "Nothing gets past the perimeter." They made it through the night, but barely. 3 times something tried to enter the camp. 3 times they drove it back with weapons fire. In the morning they found the bodies of the creatures they had killed. More of the spotted predators. A massive serpent. Something they could not identify. A creature with too many legs and mandibles that dripped with venom. The evacuation ship arrived at dawn. As Rethnar loaded the wounded aboard, he received a new message from High Commander Ithraval. "What is your status, squad leader?" Rethnar hesitated. What could he say? That his elite soldiers were being torn apart by wild animals? That a single predator had done more damage than most enemy armies? That he was afraid, genuinely afraid of a planet? "We are encountering heavier resistance than expected," he said carefully. "The local wildlife is extremely aggressive. I recommend aerial insertion directly to the objective." There was a long pause. Then, "Negative. Ground forces will proceed on foot as planned. The humans must see our strength, see our soldiers marching across their land. Continue your advance." "Understood, High Commander." The channel closed, and Rethnar looked at his surviving soldiers. They were exhausted, many of them wounded, all of them scared. And they had to keep walking through this nightmare. "You heard the commander," he said. "We move out." They moved out, and the jungle waited for them, patient and hungry. Over the next 3 days, Rethnar lost 7 more soldiers. One to a swarm of tiny insects that somehow got inside his suit and stung him hundreds of times, injecting so much venom that his heart stopped. 2 to something in the water, a school of small fish with teeth like razors that stripped them to the bone in minutes. 1 to a plant that released a cloud of spores when disturbed, spores that took root in his lungs and began to grow. A plant. One of his soldiers was killed by a plant. The others were taken by predators, by accidents, by the simple crushing weight of gravity and heat and exhaustion. By the time they finally reached their objective, the human power facility, Rethnar had only 23 soldiers left, less than 60% of his original force, and they had not encountered a single human enemy. What they found at the facility broke whatever remained of their morale. The humans were waiting for them, not with an army, not with heavy weapons. Just a few dozen humans in light armor, standing calmly behind simple barricades. They did not look scared. They looked almost amused. "Valanthi soldiers," one of them called out in accented Galactic common. "You have come a long way. You must be tired." Rethnar raised his weapon. "Surrender the facility. You are outnumbered." The human laughed. Actually laughed. "Outnumbered? You started with 40 soldiers. How many do you have now?" The cold realization hit Rethnar like a physical blow. They knew. The humans knew exactly what the jungle had done to his squad. They had been watching. Maybe they had even been guiding the predators, attracting them with scents or sounds. "This is your world," Rethnar said slowly. "You knew what would happen to us." "Of course we did," the human replied. "We grew up here. We survived here. Do you have any idea what it takes to survive on Earth?" The human gestured at the jungle around them. "Everything on this planet is trying to kill everything else. The animals, the plants, the insects, the bacteria. Even the weather tries to kill you. We did not become the dominant species by being weak. We became dominant by being more dangerous than anything else. You think your planet can stop us? We have conquered 100 worlds." "Not like this one," the human said. "This one fights back." The battle that followed was short and brutal. The humans fought differently than any enemy Rethnar had ever faced. They were fast, incredibly fast, moving with a speed that should have been impossible in this heavy gravity. They were strong, stronger than their small frames suggested, and they were relentless. But worst of all, they worked with the jungle. A soldier aimed at a human, and a snake dropped from a tree onto his head. Another tried to retreat and ran directly into a nest of stinging insects. It was like the entire ecosystem had taken the human side. Rethnar called for retreat. It was not cowardice. It was survival. His soldiers ran, back into the jungle that had already claimed so many of them, with the laughter of the humans echoing behind them. They ran until they could run no more. When they finally stopped, Rethnar counted his remaining soldiers. 16. 16 out of 40. He activated his communication device and sent a message to the eternal silence. "This is Squad Leader Rethnar. The mission has failed. I repeat, the mission has failed. The intelligence reports were wrong. This world is not a Class 7. It is a death trap. We need immediate evacuation." The response came from Kethrani herself. "All units are reporting similar problems. High Commander Yithraval is reassessing the situation. Hold your position and await further orders." Rethnar looked at his exhausted, terrified soldiers, then at the jungle that surrounded them on all sides. He thought about the predators hunting in the darkness, the venomous creatures hiding in the trees, the plants that could kill with a touch. "Hold our position," he repeated. "Against this?" In the distance, something howled, and from somewhere much closer, something answered. The night was coming, and on Earth, the night belonged to the hunters. High Commander Yithraval stood in the war room of the Eternal Silence, surrounded by holographic displays showing casualty reports from across Earth. The numbers were impossible. They had to be wrong, and yet they kept coming, an endless stream of death from the surface below. "Give me the current totals," he said quietly. Kethrani stepped forward, her face pale. "We have lost approximately 12,000 soldiers in the first week of ground operations. That is nearly 25% of our invasion force. Enemy action? Some. Perhaps 2,000. The rest?" She hesitated. "The rest were lost to environmental factors." Environmental factors. Such a clinical way to describe what was happening down there. Yithraval had read the reports. He had seen the helmet footage. He knew what environmental factors really meant. It meant soldiers drowning in sudden floods. It meant squads vanishing into sinkholes that opened without warning. It meant death by 1,000 small creatures that could fit in the palm of a hand. It meant plants that poisoned, weather that killed, and predators that seemed to come from nightmares. "We underestimated this world," he said. "Yes, High Commander." "How is that possible?" "We scanned it. We analyzed it. Our probes examined every detail." "From orbit," Kethrani reminded him. "Our probes scanned from orbit. The surface reality is different." Yithraval closed his eyes. Different. The surface reality was a nightmare that defied everything they thought they knew about habitable worlds. Worlds that supported intelligent life were supposed to be gentle. nurturing. They were supposed to have mild climates and limited predation. That was how intelligence evolved. That was how civilization developed. Earth followed none of those rules. "What are our options?" he asked. "We can continue the ground invasion with modified tactics, sealed suits, aerial transport, heavy weapons for wildlife suppression, or," she paused, "or we can withdraw, leave this world to the humans, and hope they do not hold a grudge." Withdraw. The word tasted like poison in Ithraval's mouth. The Valanthi Dominion did not withdraw. They did not retreat. They conquered or they died. That was the way it had always been. "We continue," he said. "Implement the new protocols. I want our soldiers protected from this planet's attempts to kill them." The new protocols were extensive. Soldiers would wear fully sealed environmental suits at all times. They would receive injections to combat Earth's aggressive bacterial life. They would be transported by air whenever possible, avoiding the deadly terrain. Heavy weapons teams would accompany every squad, ready to eliminate any wildlife that posed a threat. For a while, it seemed to work. The casualty rate dropped. The soldiers advanced. They established fortified bases on the surface, islands of Valanthi technology in the hostile alien landscape. But Earth was not finished with them. The first base to fall was Forward Operating Base 7, located in the northern part of a continent the humans called South America. It was a standard fortification built to withstand enemy assault. It was not built to withstand what came for it. They called it a firestorm, a wall of flame that swept across the landscape, moving faster than a soldier could run. The humans had started it, deliberately setting fire to the dry vegetation upwind of the base. The fire spread with terrifying speed, consuming everything in its path. The base's shields held for a while, but the heat was incredible. Temperatures inside the compound rose until soldiers began to collapse. The air systems failed, overwhelmed by smoke and ash. When the flames finally passed, 300 soldiers were dead. "They weaponized fire," Ithraval said when he received the report. "They set their own world ablaze to kill our soldiers." "They are familiar with fire," Kethrani replied. "They have been using it for hundreds of thousands of years. It is one of their oldest tools. A tool of destruction. A tool of survival. Fire is common on Earth. Entire ecosystems depend on regular burning. The humans have learned to use it rather than fear it." She brought up more reports. Other bases were facing their own challenges. A base in the northern regions was being buried in something called a blizzard, a storm of frozen water that covered everything in white and dropped temperatures so low that Valanthi bodies simply stopped functioning. Another base near an ocean was being hammered by massive waves and winds from a hurricane, a spinning storm system so large it could be seen from orbit. "The weather on this world is insane," Kethrani said. "Massive temperature variations, violent storms, floods, droughts, freezing, burning. The humans live with this every day." "How?" Ithraval demanded. "How do they survive it?" "They adapt. They build shelters. They wear protective clothing. They plan around the weather patterns. They have been doing it so long that they barely think about it. What is a deadly catastrophe to us is just an inconvenience to them." The ground forces pushed on, adapting as best they could. They learned to watch for fire weather. They learned to seek shelter during storms. They learned which water sources were safe and which were filled with parasites that would eat them from the inside out. The parasites were perhaps the worst discovery of all. It started when soldiers began getting sick. Not from injuries, not from obvious causes, but from something inside them. The medics could not understand it at first. The symptoms were strange. Weight loss, fatigue, intestinal distress, and then, in some cases, movement under the skin. "What am I looking at?" Ithraval asked when the first autopsy reports came in. "Worms," the chief medical officer replied, his voice shaking. "Parasitic organisms that live inside other organisms. They enter through contaminated water or food, or through the skin when soldiers walk through infested areas. They grow inside the host, feeding on nutrients, laying eggs. Some migrate through the body, causing damage wherever they go." Ithraval stared at the images on the screen. Long, pale worms coiled inside a soldier's intestines. Smaller organisms clustered in the liver. Microscopic creatures swimming in the blood. "This is monstrous," he whispered. "This is normal on Earth," the medical officer said. "These parasites have evolved alongside all other life on the planet. Every species has them. The humans deal with them constantly. They have developed medicines to kill them, but the parasites keep evolving, keep finding new ways to infect their hosts. It is an endless war. An endless war, inside their own bodies. Yes, High Commander. The humans are literally at war with their own ecosystem at all times. External threats, internal threats. They are never truly safe, never truly at peace, and yet they thrive. Ithraval ordered all troops to treat their water, to cook their food, to avoid contact with soil and water whenever possible. It helped, but it did not stop the infections entirely. The parasites were too numerous, too varied. For everyone they protected against, another found a way in. And then they learned about the oceans. The Velanthi had initially avoided Earth's oceans. They were focused on land targets, on the cities where the humans lived. But eventually, they needed to establish a presence on the water. Shipping lanes had to be controlled. Coastal installations had to be captured. The first naval group landed on the surface near a major human port city. 20 landing craft, each carrying 100 soldiers. They were expecting human resistance. They were not expecting what they found. The attack came from below. Something massive rose from the depths, something so large that the soldiers at first thought it was a submarine. It was not. It was a creature, a living thing with tentacles as thick as trees and a body like a nightmare. It wrapped itself around the lead landing craft and pulled it under the water in seconds. "What was that?" the naval commander screamed into his communicator. "What was that thing?" Before anyone could answer, more shapes appeared in the water. Fins cutting through the surface. Sleek gray bodies circling the remaining craft. The soldiers opened fire, but the creatures were fast, diving below the surface whenever weapons were aimed at them. One by one, the landing craft were attacked. Some were dragged under by the giant creature. Others were swarmed by the smaller ones, the gray hunters with rows and rows of teeth. Soldiers who fell into the water disappeared within seconds, pulled down by things they could not even see. Of the 2,000 soldiers in the naval group, fewer than 300 made it to shore. Sharks, the intelligence officer reported later. The gray creatures are called sharks. They are predators that have existed on Earth for hundreds of millions of years. Some species can grow several meters long and can bite through metal. The larger creature was likely a giant squid, a deep ocean predator that normally stays far below the surface. Normally, Ithraval repeated, there are reports of humans interacting with these creatures, training them perhaps, or simply attracting them to our forces with blood and noise. The humans know these waters. They know what lives in them. The oceans are off limits, Ithraval ordered. We do not have the resources to fight the water. But the oceans covered 70% of the planet. By avoiding them, the Velanthi were giving up most of Earth without a fight. The situation was spiraling out of control. Ithraval could see it in the numbers, in the reports, in the faces of his officers. They were losing this war, not to human weapons, but to Earth itself. He called a meeting of his senior commanders, the first such gathering since the invasion began. They met in the war room, holographic images of their tired faces filling the space. Many of them were on the surface, commanding from forward bases. They all looked haunted. "I want honest assessments," Ithraval said. "No optimism, no excuses. What is our real situation?" General Vethmar, commanding the Northern Theater, spoke first. "We have secured approximately 15% of our initial objectives. Casualties are at 38%. Disease and infection are rampant. Morale is not good. Not good. Soldiers are refusing orders, High Commander. They are afraid to leave their bases. They say the planet is hunting them. Some have taken their own lives rather than face another day on the surface." Admiral Zethkal, commanding what remained of the naval operations, went next. "The coastal campaign is a failure. We cannot operate in or near the water. The creatures there are too numerous, too aggressive. I have lost 60% of my forces without achieving any objectives." One by one, the other commanders reported similar stories. Losses to wildlife, losses to weather, losses to disease, Losses to accidents, losses to psychological breakdown. The invasion was falling apart. There is something else, Kethrani said when the commanders had finished. Something the medics have discovered that I think you all need to hear. She activated a display showing medical data that Etherval did not fully understand, graphs and charts and biological readouts. The bacteria on Earth are unlike anything we have encountered, she explained. They are aggressive, adaptable, and resistant to most of our treatments. Our soldiers are becoming sick not from one pathogen, but from dozens, hundreds. The human body has evolved to handle this constant assault. Ours have not. Can we develop countermeasures? Someone asked. In time, perhaps, but we do not have time. The infections are spreading faster than we can treat them. If we remain on the surface much longer, we will lose more soldiers to disease than to all other causes combined. Ithraval felt the weight of command pressing down on him. He had led armies for centuries. He had conquered worlds that others said could not be conquered. But this world was different. This world was actively trying to kill them, and it was succeeding. Why? He asked quietly. Why is this planet so hostile? Because it has always been this way, Kethrani replied. Earth is old, High Commander. Life has existed there for billions of years, constantly competing, constantly evolving. Every species on that planet is the product of endless struggle, endless death. Only the strongest, the most adaptable, the most vicious survive, including the humans. The humans! Etherval stared at the blue and green world rotating slowly on the display. They are not just from this planet. They are of this planet. They are part of this endless war. Yes, and they have been fighting it longer than we have. They know its rules. They know how to survive. We do not. The room was silent. Every commander knew what Kethrani was saying. They had invaded a world that had been at war with itself for billions of years. They had tried to conquer a species that had already conquered the most hostile environment in the known galaxy. They had made a terrible mistake. What do you recommend? Ithraval asked. Kethrani did not hesitate. We establish secure bases and stop all further ground expansion. We focus our efforts on survival, not conquest. We wait for reinforcements and develop proper countermeasures for this world's dangers. And we prepare for the possibility that victory may not be achievable. You are suggesting we accept defeat? I am suggesting we accept reality. We came here expecting an easy conquest. We found something else entirely. We can adapt or we can die. Those are our only options. Ithraval looked at the faces of his commanders. He saw exhaustion. He saw fear. He saw the beginning of despair. These were warriors who had never lost, and now they were losing to a planet. Implement the new strategy, he said finally. Consolidate our forces, secure our positions, and pray to whatever gods still listen that the humans do not decide to counterattack. But even as he gave the order, he knew it was too late for prayers. On the surface below, the humans were already moving. They had watched the Valanthi struggle. They had learned their weaknesses, and now, armed with the weapons that their Deathworld had given them, they were preparing to show the invaders exactly why Earth was the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. The hunters were about to become the hunted. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen had not slept in 3 days. She did not need to. Her body had adapted to the stress, the same way human bodies had adapted to every challenge Earth had thrown at them for millions of years. Sleep could wait. The enemy could not. She stood at the command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching the holographic display that showed the position of every Valanthi base on the planet. There were fewer of them now than there had been a month ago. The aliens were consolidating, pulling back from positions they could not hold. They were learning what every predator on Earth eventually learned. Sometimes the prey fights back. Status report, she said. Major James Rodriguez stepped forward. He was a big man, thick with muscle, the kind of human that evolution had designed for long-distance running and heavy labor. He could run for days without stopping. He could carry his own body weight and equipment. He had once strangled a Valanthi soldier with his bare hands when his weapon jammed. These were the kind of soldiers Earth produced. Operation Wolfpack is ready to begin, he reported. 12 strike teams positioned around Target Alpha. Air support standing by. The bugs are in place. Bugs was the nickname for the tiny surveillance drones that human engineers had developed. They were modeled after Earth's insects, small enough to slip through any gap, quiet enough to evade detection. They had been watching the Valanthe base for weeks, learning patrol patterns, identifying weak points, finding the places where Earth's dangers had already done most of the work. Casualties from wildlife at the target? Chen asked. Rodriguez checked his tablet. 17 in the last week, 2 from brown recluse spiders in their supply depot, 3 from a black bear that got into their food stores, 5 from a nest of hornets they accidentally disturbed, the rest from various smaller encounters. Good, launch when ready. The attack began at midnight, Earth time. The Valanthe had learned to fear the darkness, and that fear was about to be justified. The first wave was silent. Human soldiers moved through the forest with a skill that came from thousands of years of hunting. They made no sound. They left no trail. Their night vision was not as good as the Valanthes, but they had technology to compensate. More importantly, they had instincts. Predator instincts. Hunter instincts. They did not attack immediately. Instead, they waited. They watched, and they released the animals. Wolves had been extinct in this region for almost a century. The humans had brought them back, not as pets, not as tools, but as partners. The wolf pack understood the mission in their own way. They knew which scent was enemy, which scent was friend. They knew how to hunt together, how to separate prey from the herd, how to strike at weakness. The first Valanthe sentry died without making a sound. One moment he was standing at his post, scanning the darkness with equipment that could see heat in motion. The next, something hit him from behind, jaws closing around his throat. The wolves did not eat him. They were not here for food. They were here to kill. 3 more sentries fell before the alarm was raised. By then, it was too late. The human soldiers attacked from all directions at once. They moved fast, faster than the heavy gravity Valanthe could react. They were precise, their weapons finding gaps in armor that they had spent weeks studying, and they were relentless. That was the word that would appear most often in Valanthe reports after this night. Relentless. The humans did not stop. They did not tire. They did not give their enemies time to think, time to organize, time to breathe. They just kept coming, wave after wave, attack after attack. They are using persistence hunting tactics, one Valanthe officer reported before he died. They are not trying to overwhelm us with force. They are trying to exhaust us. He was right. Persistence hunting was humanity's oldest strategy, the one that had made them apex predators long before they invented tools. Other predators relied on speed or strength or stealth. Humans relied on endurance. They would chase their prey for hours, for days, never letting it rest, never letting it recover, until finally it collapsed from exhaustion and they could walk up and kill it at their leisure. The Valanthe at Target Alpha tried to retreat. They tried to fall back to their inner defenses, to regroup and counterattack. The humans did not let them. Every time the aliens stopped to catch their breath, humans appeared out of the darkness. Every time they tried to establish a defensive position, another attack came from an unexpected direction. And then there were the other weapons, the biological weapons. Human scientists had spent centuries studying Earth's toxins. They knew every poison, every venom, every chemical that evolution had created for killing. They had learned to concentrate these substances, to weaponize them. Now they use them. Darts coated with tetrodotoxin, extracted from pufferfish. A single scratch would paralyze a Valanthe for hours. Grenades filled with capsaicin, the chemical that made peppers hot. To humans, it was uncomfortable. To Valanthe, whose species had never evolved any tolerance for such substances, it was agony beyond description. Gas canisters containing aerosolized botulinum toxin, one of the most lethal substances on Earth. How do they survive on this planet? A Valanthe commander screamed as his soldiers collapsed around him. Everything here is poison. The answer was simple. Humans had evolved alongside these poisons. Their bodies had developed tolerances, resistances, immunities. What killed other species was merely uncomfortable for humans. And now they were using that advantage with deadly efficiency. The battle at Target Alpha lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the Valanthe base was in ruins. 3,000 alien soldiers were dead, captured, or missing. Human casualties numbered 47 against 3,000. And that was just the beginning. Across Earth, similar attacks were happening. In the jungles, human soldiers used the environment itself as a weapon, driving Valanthe patrols into areas thick with predators and poisonous plants. In the mountains, they triggered avalanches and rock slides. In the deserts, they cut water supplies and let the heat do the killing. In the oceans, they guided the great predators to enemy vessels. High Commander Ithraval received the reports in stunned silence. His invasion force was being systematically destroyed, not by superior technology, not by overwhelming numbers, but by a species that had turned its own nightmarish world into a weapon. They are using trained animals against us, one commander reported, not just for attack, for reconnaissance. Birds that fly over our positions and return to their handlers, dogs that track our soldiers by scent, even insects modified to carry cameras and listening devices. Their soldiers continue to fight after sustaining wounds that would incapacitate any Valanthe, another added. We have documented cases of humans continuing to operate after losing limbs, after severe blood loss, after injuries that should be fatal. They simply refuse to die. Their endurance is beyond anything in our records. They can march for days without rest. They can survive without food for weeks. They can function in conditions of extreme heat, extreme cold, extreme everything. It is as if their bodies were designed for war. Ithraval understood now what they were facing. The humans had not become dominant on Earth by being gentle. They had not survived billions of years of evolutionary warfare by being weak. They had become the apex predator of a death world by being harder, tougher, and more vicious than everything else. And now that they were at war, they were showing exactly what that meant. High Commander, Kethrani said quietly, we need to discuss evacuation. Evacuation? Withdrawal. Retreat. Whatever word you prefer. We cannot win this war. Every day we remain on the surface, we lose more soldiers. Our invasion force has been reduced by 60%. If we do not leave soon, there will be no one left to leave. The Dominion does not retreat. Then the Dominion will die on this planet. Kethrani's voice was sharp, frustrated. Look at the numbers, High Commander. Look at what is happening down there. We are not fighting a primitive species. We are fighting the survivors of the most hostile environment in the galaxy. They have been at war for millions of years. They know how to fight in ways we cannot imagine. She brought up more images, more footage captured by surviving soldiers and drones. Humans moving through environments that would kill Valanthe in minutes. Humans shrugging off injuries that would leave any other species helpless. Humans working together with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic, anticipating each other's moves, covering each other's weaknesses. They evolved as social hunters, Kethrani explained. They operate in groups, communicate constantly, share information instantly. When one human learns something, they all learn it. They adapt faster than any species we have ever encountered. Every tactic we use against them, they counter within days. Every weapon we deploy, they find a way to neutralize. They are the ultimate adaptive species. Then what do you suggest? That we simply give up? That we let them win? I suggest that we survive, that we preserve what remains of our fleet and our soldiers, that we return to Dominion space and regroup. The humans have not attacked our ships in orbit. They could, I think. They are holding back, waiting to see what we do. If we leave, I believe they will let us go. Ithraval stared at the image of Earth rotating slowly on the display. Such a beautiful world from orbit, blue and green and white, serene and peaceful. It was hard to believe that such horror existed beneath those clouds. If we leave, he said slowly, we admit defeat. We admit that a primitive species defeated the Valanthe Dominion. They are not primitive, Kethrani replied. They only seem primitive because we judge them by our standards. Their technology is different from ours, suited to their world and their needs. Their society is different, shaped by their evolutionary history, but they are not lesser than us. They are simply other. And on their own world, they are far stronger than we are. The decision weighed on Ithraval like the heavy gravity of Earth itself. Everything he had been taught, everything he believed, told him to continue fighting. The Dominion did not surrender. The Dominion conquered, but the Dominion had never faced anything like Earth before. "Begin evacuation procedures," he said finally. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. "All ground forces are to fall back to designated extraction points. We will withdraw from this world." The retreat was as terrible as the invasion had been. Human forces harried the Valanthi at every step, never letting them rest, never letting them feel safe. Soldiers who thought they had escaped found themselves walking into ambushes. Dropships trying to evacuate troops were attacked by missiles and aircraft. And the planet itself seemed to know they were leaving. Storms appeared out of nowhere, grounding extraction craft. Earthquakes struck near evacuation zones. Animals that had been dormant suddenly became active, attacking convoys and camps. "It is like the world does not want to let us go," one soldier said as he finally boarded a dropship. Perhaps he was right. Earth had spent billions of years creating killers, from the smallest bacteria to the largest predators. The humans were simply the most successful of those killers, the apex of an apex world. And like any predator, they did not like to let prey escape. But escape some of them did. Dropship by dropship, shuttle by shuttle, the survivors of the invasion force made their way back to the orbiting fleet. Many were wounded. Many were sick. All were changed, marked forever by what they had experienced on the surface. Ithraval watched the last dropships dock with the fleet and ordered the withdrawal to begin. The great warships of the Valanthi Dominion turned away from Earth, away from the blue-green world that had defeated them so completely. As they did, a transmission came from the surface, a human voice speaking in accented galactic common. "Valanthi Dominion, this is the United Earth Government. We acknowledge your withdrawal and will not pursue. But remember this, you came to our world uninvited. You attacked our people. You tried to conquer us." The voice paused, and when it continued, there was something in it that made Ithraval's hearts go cold. Not anger, not hate. Something worse. Pride. Earth is not a kind world. It does not forgive. It does not forget. Everything here fights for survival, always, forever. We are the children of this world, shaped by its cruelty, hardened by its challenges. We do not fear death because we have lived with death every moment of our existence. We do not fear pain because pain is our oldest teacher. Go back to your empire, Valanthi. Tell them what you found here. Tell them about the Deathworld and the monsters it created. And tell them this, we are friendly when we choose to be. But if anyone ever threatens our world again, they will face every horror that billions of years of evolution have produced. They will face us. The transmission ended. Ithraval said nothing. There was nothing to say. The fleet accelerated away from Earth, leaving the blue world behind. But Ithraval knew that the memory of this place, the things he had seen and learned here, would never leave him. He had come to Earth expecting to conquer a primitive species. He had found something else entirely. He had found the monsters. The journey back to Valanthi space took 3 weeks. For the survivors of the Earth invasion, it felt like 3 years. They moved through the ship like ghosts, hollow-eyed and silent, carrying wounds that went far deeper than flesh. High Commander Ithraval walked through the medical bays of the Eternal Silence every day, forcing himself to see what the war had cost. Soldiers missing limbs, their bodies ravaged by infections that the doctors struggled to treat. Warriors who flinched at shadows, who screamed in their sleep, who spoke of eyes watching them from the darkness. Heroes who had conquered a dozen worlds, now afraid to close their eyes. The parasites were the worst. Despite everything the medical staff could do, the creatures that had invaded the soldiers' bodies continued to cause problems. Some could be removed surgically, others were too deeply embedded, too numerous. Soldiers who had seemed healthy upon evacuation began to sicken and die as the organisms inside them completed their life cycles. "We have lost another 12 since leaving Earth orbit," the chief medical officer reported. "The parasitic infections are unlike anything in our databases. Some species appear to have multiple stages, lying dormant for weeks before becoming active. We do not know how many more we will lose." "How many soldiers will return home healthy?" Ithraval asked. "Truly healthy? Perhaps 60%. The others will carry marks of this war for the rest of their lives. physical scars, chronic conditions, psychological trauma. Earth has left its mark on every one of them. Ethravel thought about the numbers. They had sent 50,000 soldiers to Earth. Fewer than 20,000 were coming home. Of those, perhaps 12,000 would ever be fit for duty again. The rest were dead, or would soon die, or were so broken that they would never fight again. One planet, one species, and the greatest military defeat in Valanthi history. The fleet that had departed for Earth had numbered 200 warships. 67 were returning. The rest had been destroyed in the final evacuation, caught by human weapons while trying to rescue ground troops, or lost to accidents caused by exhausted crews making fatal mistakes. It was a disaster of unimaginable proportions, and Ithraval would have to explain it to the War Council. He spent the remaining journey preparing his report. He gathered testimony from survivors. He compiled footage from helmet cameras and surveillance drones. He organized medical data and tactical analyses. He built the most complete picture he could of what had happened on Earth and what it meant for the Dominion. When the fleet finally arrived at Valanthi Prime, they were met not with celebration, but with silence. Word of the defeat had traveled ahead of them. The entire empire knew that something terrible had happened at Earth. Now they would learn the details. The War Council convened in the Great Hall of the capital, the same room where Ithraval had first proposed the invasion. The 12 council members sat in their high seats, their faces grave. In the gallery above, hundreds of officials and dignitaries watched in silence. Ithraval stood before them, alone at the center of the chamber. He felt the weight of their eyes upon him, the judgment they had not yet spoken. "High Commander Ithraval," said Grand Admiral Vethrax, the leader of the council, "you stand before us to give account of the Earth campaign. We have heard rumors and fragments. Now we would hear the truth." "The truth," Ithraval repeated. He took a deep breath and began. "We went to Earth expecting an easy conquest. We had studied the planet from orbit. We had analyzed its technology, its military capabilities, its population. By every measure we used, it should have been a simple victory. We were wrong." He activated the holographic display, filling the chamber with images of Earth. Beautiful images at first. The blue oceans, the green forests, the white clouds. Earth appears peaceful from space. It is not. It is the most hostile environment we have ever encountered. The gravity alone is enough to exhaust a Valanthi soldier within hours. The atmosphere burns our lungs with its heavy oxygen. The temperatures swing from burning to freezing, sometimes within the same day. The images changed. Now they showed the horrors that waited beneath those peaceful clouds. Predators with teeth and claws. Hunters with venom and crushing coils. Swarms of insects that could strip flesh from bone. Plants that killed with poison or strangled their victims with grasping vines. "Everything on Earth is trying to kill everything else," Ithraval continued. "Every species, every organism is in constant competition for survival. There is no peace on that world. There is only war, endless and eternal. Stretching back billions of years." He showed them the parasites, the creatures that invaded the body, that ate their hosts from within. He showed them the bacteria, the viruses, the fungi that attacked the living and consumed the dead. He showed them diseases that had no cure, infections that spread through touch, spores that filled the lungs and rotted them from the inside. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away from the images. One veteran admiral, who had fought in 100 battles without flinching, covered his eyes. "We lost soldiers to all of these things," Ithraval said. "We lost them to predators and parasites and poisons. We lost them to weather and terrain and accident. We lost more soldiers to the planet itself than we did to human weapons. But the humans," he continued, "the humans are the worst of all." New images appeared. Humans running through terrain that would kill a Valanthi. Humans fighting after sustaining wounds that should have been fatal. Humans hunting in the darkness, moving in perfect coordination, relentless and unstoppable. They evolved on that nightmare world. They did not just survive it. They conquered it. They became the apex predator of a planet full of apex predators. Do you understand what that means? He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each council member in turn. It means that everything that makes Earth deadly is part of them. The aggression, the endurance, the adaptability, the willingness to fight, to suffer, to die and keep fighting. They did not learn these things. They were born with them. It is in their blood, their bones, their very souls. We thought they were primitive because their technology is different from ours. We were fools. They developed technology suited to their world, tools for surviving in hell. They do not need starships and energy weapons. They have something more powerful. They have Earth. And when we invaded them, they used Earth against us. He showed them the counterattack, the trained animals that hunted Valanthi soldiers, the biological weapons derived from Earth's countless toxins, the humans who moved through the deadly terrain like it was nothing, who turned every feature of their nightmarish world into an advantage. They know their planet, Ithraval said. They know every predator, every poison, every danger. They have been fighting these things for millions of years. And when they turned that knowledge against us, we had no defense. The final images were the hardest. The retreat, the dying, the soldiers screaming as parasites hatched inside them, the ships falling to human weapons as they tried to evacuate, the faces of warriors who had seen things no Valanthi was meant to see. We went to Earth with 200 warships and 50,000 soldiers, Ithraval concluded. We returned with 67 ships and fewer than 20,000 survivors. Of those survivors, thousands will die from injuries and infections in the coming months. The rest will carry scars for the remainder of their lives. He deactivated the display and stood in silence for a moment. This is my report. This is the truth. We invaded a Deathworld, and the Deathworld won. The chamber was silent. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Grand Admiral Vethrax leaned forward. What is your recommendation, High Commander? What should the Dominion do now? Ithraval had thought about this question during every moment of the journey home. He had considered military options, diplomatic solutions, technological responses. In the end, he had reached only one conclusion. We should leave them alone, he said. Earth should be classified as a forbidden world. No Valanthi ship should approach it. No Valanthi citizen should attempt to contact its inhabitants. We should pretend that it does not exist and hope that the humans are willing to do the same. Murmurs ran through the gallery. This was not what they had expected. The Valanthi did not hide from threats. They eliminated them. You suggest we simply ignore a species that has defeated us? One council member demanded. That we allow this insult to stand unanswered? I suggest we survive, Ithraval replied. The humans did not pursue us. They let us leave. They sent a message saying they would be peaceful if we would be peaceful. I believe them. Why? Why would such a violent species choose peace? Because they are tired of war. Ithraval's voice was quiet now, thoughtful. Think about what I have told you. They have been at war for their entire existence. Not just as a species, but as a world. Every day of every year for billions of years, Earth has been a battlefield. They have fought for survival against everything around them, even the things inside them. And they won. They conquered their world. They became the dominant species of the most hostile environment in the galaxy. But they are weary, I think. They have found peace among themselves after millions of years of fighting each other. They do not want more war. They want to rest. We should let them rest. Because if we do not, if we force them back into war, they will fight us with everything they have, with every weapon, every tactic, every horror that their world has taught them. And I do not believe we can survive that. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some argued for retaliation, for a massive fleet to punish the humans for their defiance. Others supported Ithraval's caution. In the end, the vote was close, but the commander's recommendation carried. Earth was classified as a quarantine world. All approaches were forbidden. All contact was prohibited. The humans were to be left alone, treated as if their little blue planet did not exist. But that was not the end of the story. Word spread, as word always does. Stories of the failed invasion traveled through the galaxy, passed from species to species, growing with each telling. The tale of how the mighty Valanthi Dominion had attacked a Deathworld, and how the Deathworld had sent them running. Other species began to research Earth. They found records that the Valanthi had gathered, descriptions of the horrors that waited on that blue-green world. They learned about the predators and the parasites, the diseases and the dangers. They learned about the humans, and they began to understand why the Volanthi had lost. The humans had not defeated the Dominion through superior technology or greater numbers. They had won because they were products of a world that was constantly trying to kill them. They had evolved to be survivors, fighters, predators. Every challenge made them stronger. Every threat made them more dangerous. They were the children of a world that showed no mercy, and it had forged them into something terrifying. A new phrase entered the galactic vocabulary: Deathworlder. It was used to describe any species that evolved on a hostile world, but when people said it, they usually meant humans. The original Deathworlders, the apex predators of the apex world. Trade delegations began to arrive at the edge of human space. Carefully, cautiously, other species made contact. They came not to conquer, but to negotiate, to trade, to learn. They found that the humans, freed from the threat of invasion, were surprisingly friendly, curious, creative, eager to explore and discover. But beneath that friendliness, the other species could always see the predator. It was in the way humans moved, confident and economical, in the way they watched their surroundings, always alert, always ready, in the way they could go from peaceful to violent in an instant, when they or their people were threatened. They are like their world, Warhad, one diplomat reported to his government, beautiful on the surface, deadly beneath. They smile and laugh and make jokes, but never forget what they are. They are the survivors of Earth. They are the monsters that killed the other monsters. Years passed. The humans expanded further into the galaxy, establishing colonies and trade routes. They made allies and friends among other species. They shared their technology, their art, their culture. They seemed peaceful, civilized, even gentle. But the story of the Earth invasion was never forgotten. It was taught in military academies across the galaxy, a lesson in what happened when you underestimated a species shaped by a death world. It was told to children as a warning: be careful of the humans. Be friendly, be polite, because if you make them angry, you will face not just them, but everything that made them. On Volanthi Prime, High Commander Ithraval lived out his remaining years in quiet retirement. He was treated with respect, not blame. He had tried to conquer Earth. He had failed, but he had recognized his failure and preserved what remained of his forces. That was considered wisdom, not weakness. Sometimes, late at night, he would look up at the stars and think about that blue world so far away. He would remember the sounds of the jungle, the eyes watching from the darkness, the screams of soldiers being taken by things they could not see. He would remember the human voice that had spoken to him as he retreated, calm and confident and utterly without mercy. "Tell them what you found here," the human had said. "Tell them about the death world and the monsters it created." He had told them. He had told everyone who would listen. And the galaxy had learned. The humans were not like other species. They came from a world that was trying to kill them from the day they were born to the day they died. They had survived that world, conquered it, claimed it as their own. They had become the most dangerous things on the most dangerous planet in the known universe. And now they were out among the stars. They were friendly, they were curious. They were creative and kind and full of wonder at the galaxy around them. But never forget what they were. Never forget where they came from. Never forget the horrors lurking on the death world. Because if you did, if you ever forgot, if you ever thought that you could threaten them or conquer them or hurt them without consequence, they would remind you, and the reminder would be written in blood. In the end, that was the lesson the Volanthi had learned. That was the lesson the galaxy had learned. That was the lesson carved into the stars themselves. Do not go to war with the humans. Do not threaten their world. Do not make them your enemies. Because if you do, you will face every nightmare that Earth has ever created. You will face the Deathworlders. And the Deathworlders do not lose.